So recently in a few posts that I've done, I've mentioned about fishing a shad with a nail weight and an EWG, and as promised I did say I'd put a video up today just to explain it a little bit more. So we'll look at how I rig it first, and then we'll look at why and what lure I like to use for this, and then we'll finish off with how I actually like to fish it. So very simple, just EWG hook, a nail weight and a shad. This one's a 7cm Peps, a gunky Peps, but we'll get into why I use this lure over others. So very simple, nail weight into the head of the lure, and you get down to that point where you've just got a tiny bit of tungsten exposed. We take the hook, use the eye end, and then basically what we want to do is just push that nail weight all the way in, just like that. So I don't know if you can see, but you've got a couple of mil of plastic before the nail weight starts, if that makes sense. So that's the nail weight in, and then we use the EWG hook, just Texas rigged it, but we're rigging it sideways, and that'll become clear why we're doing that soon. So that's it, very, very simple, and I'll just tie that onto the main line using a Rapala loop knot, because it's going to give it a little bit more action as well. So why would I use this over this? Same bait, 9cm, this is a 7, but it is the same bait, on a jig head. Now this is going to give you three, I'm not going to say advantages, because there are times where a jig head and a shad has caught thousands upon thousands of fish for years, and it will continue to do so going forward. But there's certain things that this is going to give you that this just won't. Now the first one is obviously it's a lot more snag proof. Now nothing that we ever throw is going to be 100% snag proof, but what we'll do is we'll get to a venue, we'll get to a section of river, lake, canal, whatever, lots of snags, lots of weed, and then we'll tend to go, I'm going to use a Cheb rig or a Texas rig, Carolina. The hook then is fish weedless, but the problem is with that, your hook might not snag, but your exposed weight, that one, your exposed weight will. So you cast it out, let it sink. We've got low line debris, weed, snags. It's just going to bury straight into it. And a lot of the snags that we get, it's not actually the hook that's catching, it's the actual exposed weight that's getting lodged into stuff, getting stuck behind rocks, things like that. We just don't get that with this. Because the weight is buried in the lure, it creates a bit of a cushion. So where this will plummet into things, this will just sit on top. Now I have snagged a few of these. Like I say, nothing is going to be completely snag proof, but this is the closest thing that I've used to getting to that point. So if you are fishing really snaggy venues, again, this could be a much better option than just a jig head with a shad on it. So that's one bonus that this will give you over that. Now the one thing that I will mention now is the lure choice is quite important. So the reason we use a gunky Peps is, if you see, it's an incredibly thin bait. So when a fish bites this, you've got loads of room for that lure to push up the shank, exposing the hook point. If we were to use a much more bulbous, thicker shad, you're not going to your hookup rates are not going to be quite as good. I have used a few other baits that have worked, just not as well. So the Peps is ideal. Now the 7cm, the 1.5 gram nail weights are definitely seems to be as big as you can go without splitting the actual plastic. If you go 2 gram, 2.5 gram, it's too much for the 7cm, and you just damage the lure. Doesn't work. So if you want to go to sort of 2.5 gram, then that's when we'd sort of have to switch up to the 9cm. Rigged exactly the same way, just this is on a 2.0, this is on a 1.0, but it works in exactly the same way. So that's one reason we use the Peps, is because it's thin, and the other reason is because it's got such a thin wrist to the tail. Now if we was using a lure that had a much thicker wrist, 1.5 gram is not enough to get that tail to go, where 1.5 gram on a Peps is perfect. That, you know, when we let that fall, the tail's going, no problem, works, you know, it works spot on. So that's one reason that this is going to be probably more effective than this in snaggy venues, and it's why we use the Peps. and the weight, the 1.5 gram weight. Now the other thing that this will give you that a standard jig head and a shad won't do, and it's probably in my eyes the most important, and that is the action that this has. Now I don't know if anybody's done much tube fishing in the UK or watched some of the American bass anglers, but in the States a technique called snapping a tube is very effective. It's very popular, and it literally is, you use a tube, which is if you're not sure, it's basically a stick bait that's hollow, and there's a special jig head that you actually place inside of it. You cast it out, you let it sink, and it spirals down to the bottom, hits the bottom, you snap the rod tip, it darts up and it spirals back down again. It looks very similar to a dying bait fish. Now because we've got this side hooked and we've got a small amount of weight inside it, what we've actually done is we've sort of unbalanced this lure. So when that sinks, because we've got weight underneath it but nothing on the top, this will spiral down just like a tube. But where this has got an advantage over a tube is that the tail's going in as well. So it's like a hybrid between fishing a tube and a shad, and it has this literal death spiral all the way to the bottom. It can be quite a difficult presentation to actually get, and probably one that gets overlooked a lot in the UK. I know some lads that fish tubes, but not many. It's not seemed to have caught on. And when you do see a lot of people fishing a tube, they will fish it almost like a Ned or a Texas rig, where they're sort of dragging it along the bottom, or just small hops. To get the best out of them kind of techniques, you really need to be snapping the rod tip to get it to come up to do what it's designed to do, which is spiral back down, and it's exactly what this does. So if you're fishing for pressured fish, this could be a technique, or not technique, but a presentation that they're not used to seeing. A couple of the venues that I fished, this has been amazing. The last week of the season, I caught a lot of fish on this. I had a 3-pounder on this exact lure just over a week ago. So it works really well. And the other thing that this is going to be very good for is for suspending fish. So even if you're fishing the reses and you can see fish on the fish finder and it's sort of mid-depth, because of the way that this falls through the water, it's not just going to come straight down through the shoal, it's going to spiral, so it's going to give you loads of hang time. So if you have got a shoal of fish that's sitting mid-depth, or you'll know you're on fish but you can't get a bite on the bottom, or you can't get a bite near the surface, they probably are fishing sitting literally mid-depth. This is going to be a great option for that, because of, like I've said, that hang time as it falls through the water. It's going to give the fish a long time to see this, and hopefully, like I say, a lot of the fish I've caught the back end of the season, the bites have come, I've let it hit the bottom, I've snapped the rod tip, this is darted up, and it's on the way down that the fish have been biting. 9 times out of 10, not every time, but most of the time. Now what else is really important if you're going to fish this and you want to get that spiral, you really do need to let it fall on a slack line. The reason being for that is we've got such a small amount of weight that if we was to hold a tight line, this isn't going to do that spiral all the way down to the bottom. It's going to basically pendulum in towards you. So if you've got a big fish sat here, we want this to sort of spiral down on top of him. But if we have a tight line, fish is sat here, it's just going to pendulum away from the fish. So it's very important. And so when this is falling, just watch your line and you'll just see it twitch. It'll literally, sometimes it's half an inch, it'll just move. That's the bite. Wind down, set the hook. That's what you're looking for. And the other way that I like to fish this as well, if they are really lethargic and they are on the bottom, cast it out. I have my rod tip dipped almost so it's below the surface, and I'll just one turn of the handle, pause, another turn of the handle, pause, all the way in. And so what's basically happening is sitting on the bottom, you turn the handle, it'll just dart up, and then you're letting it sink again. And again, most of the bites come on that slack line. It's when you're pausing, the baits hit the water, hit the bottom, and you'll see your line will just sort of go slack, and you'll get little tiny twitches again, and that's your bite. So again, wind down and set your hook. So snaggy venues, pressured venues, suspending fish, this is a really, really good way of doing it. It's so simple, it's very cost effective because you're losing a lot less baits. Well worth giving it a go. So any questions on it, anyone needs any help, advice, whatever, just drop me a message, and hopefully it'll be as successful for you as what it has been for me. And just one other thing to mention, just because I fish this way doesn't mean that you have to. The great thing about lure fishing is it's very much each to their own. You can't really do it wrong if it's working for you. So somebody might fish this completely differently to me and absolutely mop up. So it's just another rigging option, just worth bearing in mind. Don't just settle for the same things time and time again. Experiment, try different things, because it'll be them little things that you try that's going to give you that edge. So hopefully it works. Cheers.